Here, this time bringing you the kind of video that I frankly don't enjoy making, but it is about a TRPG that released into early access that largely seems to be abandoned at this point. That game being, of course, Beast False Prophet, which when I initially took a look at it during its early access launch back in, I think it was like late 2023, early 2024, is a game I thought had some neat ideas with a fair bit of potential, even if it was rough around the edges. But obviously it would seem that that potential is never going to be realized, given the developers have all but stated that they have in fact abandoned it. But as I mentioned, this was initially an early access title, which as always comes with its own risks, which is generally why I try to cover the ones that I find interesting, because as somebody who does this for a living, I'm in a much better position to absorb those risks while also showing people what this early access build could be. And that in and of itself is kind of why I like to make these follow-up videos for when those situations don't go well, because frankly, otherwise people aren't exactly forthcoming about that information. But luckily, very recently, like a week or two ago, Steam started adding notifications to early access games that will display a message about the last time they were updated if it's been a significant period of time. And Beast is, in fact, displaying that message now, which is probably your first clue that something has gone not well, frankly. But Beast, when it initially launched into early access, was interesting to me because of the mechanics at play. So it being a TRPG, it was using a gridless system with some unique combat mechanics around your main character, who was a sort of prisoner of war returned home, only to deal with his inner demons quite literally. You'll get into battles where you can attack either the enemies or your own companions to build up an insanity meter that then lets you unleash said inner demon, which gives you all sorts of buffs and stuff that you could play around with. It was genuinely an interesting mechanic, especially combined with, the more traditional sort of war camp type situation that you would upgrade and recruit companions that you could then, potentially strategically kill during missions to activate that insanity meter. Combine that with a really grim, dark aesthetic, and they were honestly onto something. But of course, claims that it has been abandoned aren't exactly materializing out of nothing, so what is that about? Well, towards the end of last year, people started getting impatient for updates, as you might imagine, and as a response to some of these natural questions and an announcement about another game, the developers eventually started responding to people in the Steam forums, basically explaining that, according to them, Beast was not financially successful enough to continue development, so instead of focusing on it, they were pouring what money and resources they did have into a brand new game. And if that game magically did well, they would suddenly use all those resources to finish Beast, which they are still currently selling, despite the fact that it is unfinished and they are not working on it, over on Steam. Now what's more, not only are they not working on this game, they actually haven't updated the game's store page at all, so if it wasn't for Steam's disclaimer, if you were to read their early access spiel, it simply mentions that they're actually still aiming for 2024 or only aiming to be in early access for months and not years, when clearly that is no longer the case. So they couldn't even be bothered to update this information. And that's ignoring entirely the fact that their claims simply don't make any sense. If you don't have the money to finish Beast, then where is the money to finish an entirely separate game that, by the way, is meant to be a Souls-like action game, which is going to be infinitely more expensive than a TRPG that is already well into a playable state? So that's the kind of situation you get into when you're being ran by someone who clearly doesn't understand how to run a business, because frankly that's simply just not going to work out for you. And to hear them tell it they're apparently working on the prototype for this other game so they can get an investor for it, but it is apparently also supposed to be launching into early access in 2025. So even with the most generous interpretations of that information, the people developing this game, or were developing this game, I suppose, clearly don't understand how basically to run a business or to handle any of that stuff. So as a result of that, they're desperately chasing down the second thing and hoping that it pays for the first, and that's just simply not a thing that is ever going to actually happen, especially given that the prototype they're working on is supposed to be this Souls-like game, and as anybody would tell you, that is an incredibly saturated market that is very difficult to break into or set yourself apart from. So the chances of, even if that second game were to get funded, it actually being successful are so infinitesimally low that spending the money and resources you did have on it in order to supposedly keep yourself afloat is little more than a pipe dream. Personally, what I think should have happened here is when they obviously saw that they didn't have enough interest or money to keep going, they should have done one of two things. They should have either shut the early access for Beast down and simply pulled it from the store, or they should have made note of what they did have the money and ability to finish, did that and explained it, and simply moved on, frankly, or shut down if that's what it came to. Because as it stands right now, they are selling actively a game that they are not working on and is almost certainly never going to be finished. And thus, as a result of all of that, I would absolutely not spend your money on this in any way, shape, or form. And quite frankly, I wouldn't support any other endeavors from this company either as a result of that, the developer and publisher of Beast being itself called False Prophet, as it is an unacceptable way to run a business, which, on that delightfully cheery note, is where we're going to wrap up this particular video. Again, I don't exactly enjoy making these, but I think it needs to be done, especially if I've covered these games, because while many great things can come from early access, unfortunately, it's also prone to misuse and abuse, which sadly seems to be the case here. But that's pretty much going to wrap it up. Hope you found the video informative. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing